Hello, everyone. My name is Rocky. Schwartz is my last name, and I am the Family Support Coordinator for the Central Region. So today we're going to talk about the Family Support Centers. There's 3 regions in New Jersey. So the one that I manage is the Central Region. So we have Middlesex, Monmouth, Union, Somerset, Hunterdon, and Mercer counties. And a lot of people still have not heard of the Family Support Centers. We're just wrapping up our 5th year of the grant. But we started really small, like all these other programs, like ORP, for example. I actually started working 15 hours a week for 3 counties, and now it's grown to, we have a person dedicated to each county, which Pam is supporting Somerset County. You could probably tell by our bios, we're quite passionate about this. I do have lived experience. I have done a lot of advocacy work. I found it very empowering to kind of turn my, I'll be honest, rage about the system, the very broken system, and to channel it into something productive. I'm honored to be able to share this with families. I wish I had had this 10 or 11 years ago, but I think it's a fabulous service that we offer, and it is confidential and it is free. And we have grown tremendously. And I'd like to introduce Pam Bianco, who is the advocate who supports Somerset County.
So hello, I'm Pam Bianco. I'm glad to be here, and I'm glad to be doing this work. I've met so many wonderful people in this work. And I remember one of the very first impressions I had when I interviewed for it was, maybe it was you, Rocky, or it was probably you, saying that our approach is basically about kindness, and that kindness, diligently applied to most situations makes them better. And I thought that was a really good way to approach things that are typically approached with judgment and harshness. So craft and family support services, we're going to be talking about that. Community reinforcement and family training is what is the acronym CRAFT stands for. And I want to quote you, David Sheff, who wrote Beautiful Boy, A Father's Journey Through His Son's Addiction, which was made into a movie, Beautiful Boy. You might have heard of that. In a recent New York Times guest essay recently said, there are effective ways to get people into treatment who don't want it. One of the most effective is community reinforcement and family training, or CRAFT. This approach to encouraging people to get treatment isn't characterized by blame, threats, and ultimatums, but by expressions of love, empathy, and support. So, what we will explore today is how substance use disorder, or SUD, S-U-D, we'll use the acronym sometimes, affects families, how family support can help, objectives and services of family support in general, origins of the CRAFT approach, and how family support uses CRAFT.
So first, we wanted to review what kind of trauma impacts the families that we see. Witnessing overdoses, emergency room visits, which sometimes are quite stressful, even more traumatic sometimes, depending on the staff and how the person is treated. Calls and visits from police, from probation officers, especially those middle of the night knocks and ringing the doorbell, absolutely terrifying. Having an officer, probation officer show up at your house and come in and look at bedrooms and open your refrigerator. It feels like a violation, even though that is a consequence. Car accidents. Getting that call in the middle of the night, that your son ran into a tree. Some of what I'm sharing is personal experience. Early unexpected discharge of patients. So many of our families, they finally get their loved one into treatment, into detox or withdrawal management, and think that there's going to be a little bit of a respite. And then they get the call like day 3, day 4, that insurance is no longer paying and you got to pick them up. That happens frequently. The family member is unprepared for that. If they don't pick them up and it's an adult, most of you already know this, but they send them to a motel and they give them an Uber to get there. Not the most ideal situation for someone who is in the midst of the cycle of addiction. Late night calls, searching for loved ones in unknown neighborhoods. We have family members that have gone into places where are very unsafe, are terrifying, but they do it out of love and concern. And then the last one is suicide attempts. I don't know what the latest statistic is, but it was 80%. I think it's probably higher of people who have co-occurring disorders, and suicide attempts, or it could be accidental overdoses, but we don't really know till after the fact, are absolutely traumatizing for the family member, especially if they walk in and find them. Same with the overdoses. So when family members come to us, and I'll give you an example of a referral source. So if someone ends up at our WJ Somerset and they've been through, where they've had, what do they call it? PRP there, right? It's the ORT program, but it's called, Pam, help me out here, because every
I'm
hospital
sorry.
Okay. So when someone
The
has
All Recovery program, where they go
the
from
peer
Robert Wood
recovery
Johnson.
program.
All
So
Recovery.
let's say that someone comes in, they have been reversed via Narcan, and there is an intervention in the hospital, a recovery coach, patient navigator works with them. A lot of times they will give the family member our card. So we'll get a call from a family member that has just witnessed an overdose, that has just been through the hospital, and they are a mess and they don't know what to do. So we will talk more about what kind of services that we offer.
Yeah, sometimes they're coming from traumatic events at home before they got to the hospital, and they're still, there's no resolution at the hospital.
Yeah. And frequently, we support all family members. So it could be a spouse, a significant other, it could be a child, an adult child, or sometimes we see the adult child and it's the parents. But in many, many cases, it's more than one person who has substance use disorder. So that is doubly traumatizing, if there's such a word. That's not very clinical, but and I also wanted to just mention, we are not going to wait till the end for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, they can put something in the chat. Rena will let me know. Or that's probably better because I can't see everybody's hand while I'm showing the slides. Thanks.
I just want to clarify, Rocky, we see any family member over 21, right? It's
yes,
adult. We don't
correct.
offer family support to children. That's not part of our grant.
Correct. So how does substance use disorder impact the family? Compromised physical health. I have been known to break out into hives. I've been known to end up in the emergency room with anaphylaxis, and they could not find a physical explanation for it. back pain, blood pressure, weight loss or weight gain, sleep disturbances. All these things are manifestation of the emotional stress that these people are under. Depression, anxiety, the isolation that these family members feel. Many of them are shunned by other family members that are judging them, telling them what to do. They also feel isolated from neighbors, from colleagues. It's a very, very lonely place to be. Huge strain on relationships, any kind of relationship. Many, many times a family member works with someone like Pam, and that is the only person that person is talking to.
Yeah,
they
that's
are
true.
not sharing their drama, their trauma, their pain. They're not sharing it with their best friend. Many times the spouse or the significant other has a different take on it. One wants to practice tough love and throw them out, and maybe it's a step parent that gets really complicated. So the isolation is very powerful, and that strain on the relationships. The self-doubt. Now, people no longer trust their intuition. Just don't know what the right thing is to do anymore. And there are plenty of people that are willing to give their opinions. And as you learn more about what we do with craft, there is no one way. We recognize that it's not all black or white, that there is a lot of gray. They're empty spiritually. A lot of people just feel like they have no more hope. They don't have any faith. They don't trust systems. They don't trust people. And they don't necessarily have a lot of trust in the universe or their God or anything that at one point gave them some comfort. Diminished capacity to perform at work. This is due to cognitive decline from the stress. When someone is living in that fight or flight mode all the time, it really does impact a person's ability to think the way maybe they did in the past, to be able to organize their thoughts, to be able to stay within a structure. It's a very, very difficult thing, and it does impact every part of a person's life. And the financial strain, even if a person has insurance, and in Somerset County and in Hunterdon County, we have a lot of families that, because I think of the socioeconomic situation, a lot of families that do have private insurance, that doesn't mean that they are getting the treatment that they should get. Most providers are out of network. If you don't have out of network benefits, that's costing a lot of money. Many times the insurance denies the treatment. We had to take out a second mortgage to pay for treatment. We had to completely dissolve college savings accounts. Like it is a financial strain and another huge stressor that these families have to live with every day.
Yeah, and the stress of that financial thing, I think about it a lot because it seems to be so important in terms of being able to get treatment or the kinds of connections you can make. I feel like I know it's an experience of mine that, having a child who needs a certain kind of treatment, and there's a treatment out there, but you can't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, it's very, and I just want to say that this list of, impacts on the family, it varies with everybody. Not everybody is going to have all these things, but any one of them is possible. And one of the things we want people to know is that it's natural. It's not like a failing. It's not a character failing that these things are happening to you, which
Right.
is, reducing the isolation and giving people someone to talk to does a lot to.
The other interesting thing about the financial strain is we have people that, let's say the mother is paying for someone's rent but dad doesn't know about it. So they are tapping into their savings, not being honest with their spouse because they're just trying to keep their kid alive.
Yeah.
That also causes, a lot of strain. And we've had people that, buy, if they can, they buy their loved one a condo, like out of the first time they're out of treatment. If people have the means, they do things that really, really does cause a lot of financial damage.
Yeah. So part of our job, which we'll also talk about further on, is, advocacy in general. And, one of the things is for me, I think about a lot is, making more treatment more readily available for everybody.
Right.
Yeah. Affordable.
So what are our objectives? You want to take this one, Pam?
Yeah. Okay. So our family support center objectives, and some of this will seem a little to echo later on when we talk about what CRAFT objectives are, because CRAFT is a family support strategy. So, but family support center objectives in general, the first thing is to reduce that stress and isolation, to make contact with somebody, to let them know they're not alone. And that's huge. People often respond to say, wow, I am so thankful that I reached out, because you can just breathe a little better just having talked to somebody, just having made contact with someone who understands and who isn't judging you over this, and who may be able to offer some help, but the most important first thing is that connection. They aim to develop positive coping skills to offset some of those debilitating effects of trying to support someone with a substance use disorder. Increase knowledge of available resources. That includes, resources for the family, as well as resources, possible resources for the loved one, like possible treatment resources, and also other support groups, because as we've said, we don't think that we're not dogmatic. We don't think we have the only way of doing things, here are groups, we want people to make as many connections as possible, and as is comfortable and useful to them, I should say, and to build resiliency, to help people, feel strong enough and have the internal resources to be able to kind of stick with it, if that's the appropriate thing, to be able to run the marathon. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
Right. And I think another thing, Pam, is that we take for granted things like the PHP, IOP, right? Inpatient,
yes, absolutely.
residential, and also just educating people. They end up in a emergency room and they're handed a piece of paper and told, call this place, it's an IOP. Like, people do not understand what that means. So, and it is, once we can help demystify some of the system and the way that it works, it's very empowering for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Intensive outpatient services, right? Like, all those acronyms, and people do get all that stuff thrown at them, and it's totally overwhelming and totally kind of tends to shut you down. So that's another reason that having family support is somebody you can go and ask about all these things that come up, somebody who may have some answers or can direct you to answers.
And especially if you're in an emergency room, or you called the police and they come to the scene of an accident and they start talking to you like that cognitive decline that we talked about before, you can't take it in. It just, even if you know what that is, it just doesn't make sense at the time. So.
Yeah, which is some of the positive coping skills seem so simple, but stressing them or repeating them, helping people to kind of have them in their pocket, like just to breathe, just little 5-finger breathing exercises, or, just a to remember to hit a pause button, so that you can respond instead of reacting. Those are invaluable. They seem so small, but to actually practice them consistently is huge in situations where you're constantly coming across crisis.
Pam, I have a
Yes.
question from
Yes.
Cynthia. She asked if I need to refer someone, what is the best number or person to contact?
I guess Rocky's number, because you're not saying which county. We do kind of try to go by counties, and there's somebody for every county in New Jersey. So,
And we have it in the last slide that you
yes,
will
all the
get afterwards.
contacts. Thank
Yes.
you, Rocky. There will be a slide that has all the county contact numbers.
Perfect.
So Family Support Center services. So this is what we offer. Family Support Center advocates have craft training and are certified peer recovery specialists, CPRS. We are peers. We all have lived experience of having a loved one with some kind of substance use issue. And our grant requires this training and certification. So what we offer is individual support, which I think is all these things are important. Individual support via text, in-person, email, virtual. We meet on Zoom. But we also, we'll go and have a cup of coffee with somebody, go for a walk. That's often a good way to have a conversation that's less stressful. We offer a craft family group. And I believe all the family support centers do. So that's a, multi-person group. We offer naloxone kits, and we sponsor naloxone trainings, Narcan trainings, 4 times a year. I think we do at our center.
We're doing it monthly now.
Monthly, sorry.
Because
And so you get the training, and you also get
collaborating with the recovery center.
Yes. So that's something we should say too. Most of the family support centers are affiliated with a recovery center as well, and often have joint projects or whatever. We promote harm reduction as a useful philosophy and tool in recovery, and positive communication skills, which is very important. And
we do have fentanyl test strips that we can get from a recovery center that we can give to family members. Thank God naloxone is more easily accessible right now, but we literally have been known to meet somebody in a grocery store parking lot and hand them their kit, their naloxone kit. And we have had a couple of moms in particular that have saved their kids' lives. And then we make sure they get it again very quickly.
Yeah. We have actually right now, we have 2 craft family groups. One is focused on being very specific about craft strategies and exercises to learn them. And the other is craft infused, but has more of a personal feeling and has more room for people to kind of process things and talk about what's going on in their lives.
And there's more.
So family support coordinator services continued. We aim to educate families about the stages of change and appropriate interventions. We'll talk more about stages of change further on. We can help to locate resources, provide information on unethical practices. Rocky can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is educate families about patient brokering practices. Basically, if it sounds too good to be true, it is too good to be true. There are certain flags like free airfare or free rent. And we actually do a survey that, Rutgers also helps track the data for us. We have a whole section on unethical practices, and in every case, people do not know anything about this. And I had one situation where, because of the survey and because it opened the door to have this discussion, a mom called me one day and said, I'm getting all these weird phone calls that that from Florida, and they want my son to be able to go to treatment. Is this what you were talking about? So it's really important. It is not just happening in what we used to call the Florida Shuffle. It's not just happening there. It's happening in our own backyards. It is sadly, I don't want to get into all the details.
Well,
The advocate and me will get all angry, but
right. It's capitalist. Sorry, like it's a money making thing, and of course there's going to be that kind of business side to it, and we try and find like there's the Atlas directory of services, and I know you guys have Stephanie Billets is keeping a list of resources that's up to date and very useful.
yeah, she is.
So keeping lists of of reputable sources is a way to counteract some of these predatory groups too.
Yeah, and it's really taking advantage of someone who's in such a vulnerable place, that is so desperate, that's so terrified, that they will, it sounds fabulous, and put their kid on a plane, and next thing you know, they're just getting bounced around from one place to the next. So we've also had a parent who was able to recognize how many urine tests that they were being billed for.
Wow.
And that's really important, because that's the only way we're going to put a stop to this stuff, is that if the consumers become more educated. And finally,
Yeah, and the last thing we'll say about support coordinator services in general is that we don't always do this, because sometimes a family member isn't interested, we meet them where they are. What they seem to need and want is what we try and give them. But if people are interested, we can help with the development of an individualized wellness plan. And we base that on SAMHSA's 8 dimensions of wellness, which you can see there in the pretty color wheel. I'm a former art teacher, so I really like this wheel. It's like, okay, this is great in here. I remember back in the day, the term was holistic, like approaching something holistically. So that means, all parts of your life. And there's no doubt that when one area of your life is affected, other areas can also be affected. And so that goes for negative effects, and it also goes for positive effects. So it's very useful. I have a participant right now. We met and we talked, and she was interested in the 8 dimensions of wellness. And we just chose 2 for her to focus on in the beginning, the social and physical. It's like, okay, those are, little steps where she felt like she could be successful at kind of making sure she did some kind of exercise, or, drank more water or something. And also, calling a friend every week, or, so, and this is a good thing. Yeah.
The other beautiful thing about that is it's taking a little bit of that hyper focus on the loved one and being able to look inward, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's a like counterintuitive thing for people to understand, that actually there are times when it's more productive, even for the help you want to give to your loved one, where it's more productive to step back and think about yourself, or think about your family in general, or, take that focus off of them and onto like a more generalized kind of.
So
I
let's
have a question for you guys.
Oh, go ahead.
So Gail had asked, where in Somerset County do family groups meet?
We meet virtually. So we have a Wednesday night family group from 6:30 to 7:30, and that's a virtual group. And that's us. I don't know what other, I'm not sure what other in-person family support groups there might be in Somerset County. I've also been thinking about starting up for the fall, like a walk, like taking walks, finding places throughout Somerset County that might be accessible to different areas, and holding a walk where we could get together.
And let me just say that pre-COVID, we had in-person meetings, and we're just meeting people where they're at. We tried doing hybrid. We tried getting people to come back together, and overwhelmingly people want to stay virtual for this.
Yeah.
And I think it's a combination, it's convenience, but also for people, let's say, that things are not going well at home and they don't want to leave their loved one at home alone, or they've been gone at work all day. It really seems to work better for them.
Yeah.
We do have in-person self-care events, which maybe we can talk about a little bit later. Pam will be doing one in October that's going to be hosted by the Pioneer Center right downtown. So we try to do that, but I guess for now we're going to keep them virtual because that's what people want.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
not everybody comes to group either. Some people want to work individually.
Right. I recently have a couple of people who they don't like to do computer at all. So we send out a newsletter with the topic for our family group, and then we just have a phone conversation the next day about the topic. So
now
so-
let's take a deep dive into craft.
okay.
I am curious, is anybody, you could raise your hand or put in the chat, is anyone familiar with craft? Used craft? Gail, yay. Danielle, awesome.
I can't really see people, but it seemed to me very likely that people would have heard of it because I think it's gaining prominence as a strategy for helping people actually in all kinds of areas. And so when I was trying to research this, it is originally was focused on therapists and ways that therapists could work with families and help them to support their loved one. So the development of craft was originally developed by Dr. Robert J. Myers at the University of New Mexico. And it was based on his work with Nathan Azrin, I think is his name, another professor who created something called community reinforcement approach. And that was a behavioral approach to helping individuals with substance use. And then Dr. Myers, they found that individuals who were in actually a medication-assisted recovery program did better if their families were more involved, because their families could encourage them to take the medication, or they just did better in general. And so he kind of developed craft to help families stay in touch and stay part of the focus. So both of those things, important aspects of them, are meeting the person where they are. The behavioral understanding of rewards and reinforcers. They had a very complicated record-keeping process at first for CRA. But anyway, what are the rewards and reinforcers for substance use? And understanding what rewards or reinforcers, often community, that's the community reinforcement part, often social contacts and community that would reinforce recovery.
And I know when I did my original training with Dr. Myers, it has been used in Europe for decades. It's just catching on here, beyond catching on.
Yeah,
It's
right.
hot, and I love it.
That's a reference to a book that refers to the whole philosophy beyond addiction. So community reinforcement and family training, main objectives are to influence a loved one to seek treatment, because although you can't control what someone else decides to do or does, you can hope to have influence. Encourage family members to make positive change. That's acknowledging that, when one member of a group changes, the others have to at least somewhat change. And so everybody's involved in a process of positive change. And to reduce a loved one's substance use. harm reduction ideas, if not total abstinence or, total cessation.
And it's collaborative. And in this day and age with fentanyl, we want to keep people alive, right? Can't get them into treatment if we can't keep them alive. And so the objective also is, if it's safe, to keep your loved one engaged.
Yep.
Keep them engaged in your life. What did Johann Hari's quote was? The opposite of addiction is connection.
Yeah,
right?
I like that.
I know, I love that. So if we can keep our loved one engaged, we're much more likely to get them help or to reduce the use.
Yep.
Very different approach.
So how does the CRAFT approach help family members and loved ones? First of all, help in understanding substance use disorder from a perspective that has some hope to it, understanding that people have reasons for what they do, and that there is some hope that you can find other ways to meet those needs or, address those reasons. Also understanding that it's it's a medical condition. I mean, it's something that can be treated and understood as a medical condition. Strategies to influence motivation and behavior change, positive communication skills, and self-care. So the CRAFT approach is really big on, taking care of yourself. Boundaries are part of that. Our wellness plans, the things that we do to support our families, are part of that, because people do better when their families or somebody is able to stay in touch with them, remain in some kind of positive connection to them. And families and loved can only do that if they take care of themselves. So,
and we're building empathy and developing compassion when typically there's a lot of resentment and anger. And so a lot of these skills helps the family member to develop a better understanding. What do we?
There's right. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Rocky. Like, I have a family now who, there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of should I just let him say that to me? And, the disrespect and, just the dysfunctional communications, and people feel like, well, I need to shut that down. I need to respond heavily to that. And, for them to understand that, this is a person in crisis and a person who's ill, and their responses are not going to be rational. They're not going to say, oh, you feel very strongly about this, I should take a look at it. What am I doing? It's more subtle than that. So CRAFT strategies: self-care, managing stress and emotions, positive communication, setting healthy boundaries, building community connections, and understanding stages of change. Hold on one sec. So we'll go through these one by one and just expand a little bit on them. So self-care, well, 2 by 2 maybe. Self-care and managing stress and emotions. One of the things that we try and we offer and talk about are de-escalation techniques, such as neutral communication. I mean, obviously there's crisis intervention methods and stuff like that. We're not talking about that kind of de-escalation so much as just, not getting into power struggles, not getting into screaming matches, learning to say, when we say neutral communication, it could be something as simple as, you don't have to answer. that's an important thing to understand, is that you don't have to agree or disagree or give a definitive answer. You can listen and be open and respectful and not be ready to give an answer. And that's a respectable way to, you can say, thank you for telling me that. I didn't understand that before. I'll think about it. Let's talk about this again. You know, things that just buy time, basically. And so that we're not responding out of our first reaction, which might be fearful or angry. Or identify triggers for violence and develop safety plans. You know, some people keep a little like go kit in their car so that if something were going on at their house and it wasn't safe to stay there, and, you know, getting police help or something wasn't really an option, they have, you know, a toothbrush and, you know, credit card and whatever, they can go and stay at a hotel or something.
And if there's domestic violence involved, we do always refer them to
Absolutely.
safe. Yes.
Right. Absolutely. We do, yes, refer people to the appropriate support. And learn ways to take care of themselves and reconnect with their values so that family members' lives are centered on their own well-being. I forget, we touched on that before in another slide, but it's an important, about the wellness thing. It's an important thing and a little bit counterintuitive to feel like the best way to help somebody sometimes is to step away and take care of yourself, and to, you know, reconnect with what you think is right and important and what makes you feel like you're living a good, healthy life. You are in a better position then to be able to assist someone else, or even just ride out something with somebody else, whatever, you know, your fate happens to be.
This is a skill, and it's the most important thing, and it's not the most important, it's the hardest thing for our family members to get. It's because they are so hyper focused on their loved one. But you know, at the self-care events, you know, we've had some amazing ones. We had a floral designer teach us how to make beautiful bouquets. We had a brunch where they
we had a tea,
right?
We've
had painting, paint. Well, Pam's the artist, but just sitting around with other people that are in the same boat. They're modeling the self-care, and after a while they get it, that whole oxygen mask metaphor, that it is very, very serious, that they can in fact do what they want to do, which is to try to help their loved one, but they can't do it if they're not taking care of themselves.
Yeah, and it is modeling a better way to live and interact, you know, even with the positive communication skills and things, people, well, we'll get to that, I guess, but yeah, it's important to model taking care of yourself. So positive communication, to understand why a loved one is using substances the way they are, and use that understanding to encourage alternative coping skills. One thing that's involved in this is true empathetic listening, and we'll get to that too later on. But a lot of times our first reaction, I know my first reaction to things like somebody in my family using substances is like, you know, stop that, and that's, you know, terrible, and it is, and I want them to stop. But the process of change inside an individual is their own process, and I'm not going to be able to understand it or support it unless I can really listen and try to understand why they're using. I mean, you can't always do it. Obviously, all these things there's a degree of idealism, but they are worth pursuing. Just like, you know, just like any tiny baby step in these directions really does improve the general atmosphere and the possibilities that exist. Improve communication skills to more effectively express needs and requests. sometimes communication has broken down so far when you're so frustrated and so frightened of what's going on in your family and with your loved one, that you need help in getting back to just very basic communications. And it really does help. It's amazing. It's very simple ideas about respectful communication and restraint. Improve empathetic active listening skills to increase connection, collaboration, understanding, and respect. These are the things we need in our private lives and in our communities. Have conversations about use and treatment in ways that ultimately encourage recovery. And there are some, motivational interviewing. It also comes into it. Motivational interviewing isn't, strictly speaking, part of the CRAFT program, but most, like the Centers for Motivation and Change, they do talk about motivational interviewing along with CRAFT techniques. So 2 acronyms to remember for motivational interviewing are OARS and LOVE. OARS stands for open-ended questions, and this is a really important thing. The main thing in trying to have conversations that bloom into actual conversations is don't ask yes or no questions. Ask open-ended questions. Give affirmations of what people tell you. Try to really listen openly and affirm what they're saying, even if you don't agree with it. You don't have to agree with it to acknowledge that this is what they're feeling and that it's brave of them to share it. And then reflective listening, kind of giving back what you think you've heard them say and asking them if they want to add anything to it, asking if you're correct, if you've got the right idea. And finally, summarizing, which is another kind of reflective listening. So like, for instance, if I ask you, did you exercise every day this week? You might just say no. But if I say, what kinds of exercise do you enjoy? Then I might get some answers. And more importantly, I might cause you to think about what kinds of things you might enjoy. And then I can affirm that, and we can, the conversation can move on. Love.
We role play with families.
What's that?
We role play with families.
Yes.
Because these are not easy. Open-ended questions are not easy.
No, sometimes I stammer with people. I'm like, how would it be? What would it look like? I'm trying to make, let me find, I have a thing written down about love, the love one. So love is the empathetic listening one. So, listening is, of course, more than just, thinking you're hearing what somebody's saying. You have to really focus your attention on them, acknowledge how they are feeling, their emotional state. Try to put yourself in their place. Offering is one way I learned it was, before you give advice or resources or recommendations, make it an offer, say, would you like to hear some things that I've thought about? Or would you like to, can I tell you some things I see that I've thought about? And then you can offer some advice.
I think the other thing, Pam, is in the offering area is, let's say that someone wants to try to get their loved one with some kind of social services, to apply for SSI, to get some Medicaid, something. We encourage people, offer to help them, because when they think, oh, if they want to do it, they'll do it on their own, they may not be capable. As a matter of fact, they're very likely not capable of dealing with the bureaucracy, of waiting in line, of getting hung up on the computer. So we give people, we give people the validation. It's okay. You're helping them move toward recovery. They just are not capable of doing that. So to offer that kind of help, or to find a therapist, to help find a psychiatrist.
And that moves right on down the line. Like, we can offer to families, you know, to walk somebody through something that seems overwhelming or just not approachable in terms of finding resources or something. And then, you know, maybe they can help their loved one in the same way. So validation, you've listened, you've offered perhaps some feedback if the person was willing to hear it, and then you want to validate their experience, validate what they've shared with you, acknowledge that it's real, and you know, you hear them, and you understand the importance of what they're saying. And empathizing, we all know what empathizing is, I think. You know, trying to put yourself in someone's place, or just doing it because you can't help it. That is also a way of validating. So, you know, you don't have to agree with someone in order to empathize with them, in order to validate you know, to understand and reassure them about the validity of their experience, that what their experience is real and important. Okay, I think I'm done with that one. Setting healthy boundaries. This is really important also, and something that people sometimes get confused about with the craft approach in family support, because a lot of times they've come from other approaches that have said, you know, you have to set very hard boundaries, and then we talk about, you know, trying to soften those edges a little bit, and they think that we don't mean that you should set boundaries, but we acknowledge that you have to set boundaries sometimes. It's different for different families, and but you have to set the ones that you need to protect yourself, your family, and your loved one. So along the way to doing that, you have to decide which real world consequences you're willing to have them experience and which ones you're not. You know, for some people, having a loved one go to jail is not, that's beyond the pale. They cannot imagine that happening. And so they do whatever they can to avoid that. Choose what boundaries are most critical and can be followed through on. And that's, of course, very important. A boundary is useless if you can't follow through on it. And if you set a lot of boundaries and don't follow through on them, then you're less effective. You know, the person is not going to believe that these boundaries are meaningful. And to set and maintain boundaries in ways that are effective yet kind, that's another thing that's difficult to understand, and yet it's true. You can set boundaries, you can say no and still be a kind and loving person and still be supporting someone. And you can do it in a way so that they feel your love and kindness, even though you're saying no, or even though you're setting a boundary that they don't really want you to set. So.
Building community connection.
You want to take that one, Rocky?
Sure.
Okay.
So we do encourage family members to learn everything they can about substance use disorder. And that includes the stages of change, which I think we're going to go into. So, for example, if they understand pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, if they understand that their loved one is in a pre-contemplation stage, there's no point. They're wasting their energy, they're wasting their time, blah, 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 blah. You need to do this, you need to go where, you know, they need to try to, if we can educate them about these different parts of recovery, if we can educate them about that recovery is not linear, that there are going to be bumps along the way, and that is okay. That when we say one size doesn't fit all, a lot of times families are told to throw their loved one out in the street. And maybe that's acceptable. But maybe they're not doing it, but they're ashamed to tell all these other people that are telling them to do it. So we don't judge people. They could, and there's no point in threatening to throw someone out if they're not willing to do that. And also it may change depending on where that person is. I'll give you a real life example. You know, there was a time that a loved one was out on the street and had the coping skills to deal with that. And that was a choice that they made. But then a couple years down the road, when it was very close to losing that person, we opened the door with the condition that they would maintain abstinence and get into treatment. So we encourage people, number one, not to set these hard and fast rules, that situations change, that what, you know, one person in a meeting is comfortable with, the other person is not, that they need to be able to feel comfortable with what other option they choose. And then we do encourage them, obviously we talked about this, to make connections with other families, to reduce the isolation and to also reduce the stigma that people are feeling. And actually the next slide, we're going to go into stigmatizing language. So this is another thing that we have had groups on. We share this with family members. We try to teach them to use non-stigmatizing language. It is uncomfortable at first, but the more that a person does it, the more natural it becomes, and it is amazing. So if they say, my son's an addict, my son is a person who has substance use disorder, it just feels better. They relapsed. They had a recurrence of symptoms, just like any other kind of illness. We don't use clean and dirty. You know, they test that. It's horrible to say someone is dirty, right? They tested negative or they tested positive. Medication-assisted treatment, that's something that we spend a lot of time, a lot of family members don't understand it. They think you're replacing one drug with another. So we say, just use the word medication. Why do we have to say medication-assisted treatment? The person may not even, they're in recovery. They're not in treatment. I don't have to tell you why I take a medication for depression. I just take medication, right? So we're just trying to take the stigmatizing language away. And there are two words we do not use. We do not call anyone an enabler, and we don't call anyone codependent. People have already been shamed too much. Those are labels. They're not even a clinical diagnosis. You know, we just take that away. There was a book called Prodependence, and we believe everybody is trying to do the best job they can, and there's no judgment. So does anyone have questions about this slide or anything so far?
I have a quote from the Prodependence book. Instead of viewing caregivers as part of the disease, Prodependence views them as being in crisis and behaving as anyone in crisis would naturally behave. That doesn't mean that they can't, you know, find better ways to respond in some instances, or, you know, that's kind of one of the main points that I have learned since doing this work, is that you can want something to change without putting down the state that it's in now. Like people
Right.
can be in a place that needs adjustment without being bad or without being wrong. It's just like it's evolutionary. Things evolve, understandings evolve, people's perception of what they're doing and what they should be doing evolves.
And people are so tired of a finger being pointed at them by other family members. You're nothing but an enabler.
Yeah.
It just hurts. And so we don't use those two words at all. So let's go into stages of change, Pam.
Okay,
I
so
gave a little teaser earlier. I didn't mean to do that.
there are 5 stages of change. Typically, we talk about pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and maintenance. And we should say that this is typically understood as the stages of change in a person with a substance use disorder before they choose to make changes and maybe go into recovery. We also consider that families recover as well, and that families also are going to experience changes along with their loved one. So these slides are kind of from a family member's point of view. So in pre-contemplation stage, people might be at the like, why change? I don't have a problem. Oh, my loved one has a problem. And, of course, that's true. But on the other hand, also changes in how one communicates or how one looks at things could make a commensurate change with the loved one. They might be saying and thinking, I'm in control of the situation. I am unaware of any reason for myself to change. But then comes contemplation. I'm beginning to think about my relationship with my loved one. So this is where I'm saying this is, kind of from the perspective of a family member saying, well, maybe I could talk differently, or maybe I could think about things differently, do something differently. I start to consider alternatives. And then preparation. I've decided to make some changes in my actions. I begin to develop new listening and communication strategies. I seek healthy support for myself, and I set goals and make plans. And then action, actually trying these new behaviors, these new strategies, assess and evaluate the actions, see which ones work, which ones feel comfortable for me. I continue working towards my healthy goals. And maintenance, setting healthy boundaries is feeling good. You start to feel healthy again. Making healthy decisions is becoming more intuitive, feels more natural. Like I'm beginning to see the benefits of the changes I've made.
There's a couple things I want to jump in. The preparation stage, one of the tools that we share with people is to also be prepared when there's that, that moment of opportunity where your loved one's willing to get some help. So to have in your purse or in the notes on your phone numbers for treatment centers, your insurance information. Maybe they've already done the homework to find out what's in network. So to be prepared for that, because those moments do happen, that is very, very helpful. And then the other thing that I wanted to share about the action is that it has been a beautiful sight to see some of these family members become a beacon of hope for their peers, regardless of how their loved one's doing. And also to watch some of them advocate for their loved ones or for themselves. So for example, we had a few family members that testified to the state for the opioid listening sessions about the opioid settlement money. That is amazing. So they were able to take this painful experience and to try to do something productive. It was very empowering. We also had a family member speak at an overdose awareness event. She did not lose her loved one, but she was able to speak. She spoke in particular about harm reduction because his whole peer group has passed away. So it's really been exciting to watch some of these family members move through these stages.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to jump on where you said about preparation, Rocky. Yes, to have resources that you will need as a family member ready. And also something we say to family members is you can find like one good resource for your loved one to reach out to. And, you know, you tell them about it, you put it up on the refrigerator. If they are still in the pre-contemplation stage, they may tear it down and throw it away. And you just put it up again. And you just, like, it's always there, you know. And someday, as Rocky said, you know, you never know when that moment comes when a person is just sort of open, you know, and might pick it up and make that call. So our own, you know, family resources, and also, you know, a resource for the loved one. So Rocky,
I jumped a slide. Oh,
no, you're there. You're there. How are we doing on time? Are we over, under?
2:41.
Okay.
So we do have time. We wanted to just give one example of a tool that we use to help develop this understanding and this empathy. We happen to just do this in a group that we had last week. So we use workbooks. We work closely with the Center for Motivation and Change in New York City. And they, you know, have Dr. Meyer's blessing. And so we've done a lot of craft trainings with them, and they have a book called the Invitation to Change workbook. They also published something called the 20-minute guide a few years ago. So here's an example. We did this in group last week, and we asked family members to take a look at this list and think about the things that they need or they want in their lives. And you can take a peek at the list. Then we ask them to think about their loved one. What does that person need? And how did their substance help to meet that need? So, for example, to not feel depressed, right? To not suffer with physical pain. How many people have become addicted to opioids for that, right? To have friends, especially a young person who has social anxiety, right? And it really, the other night, was amazing how that led to a whole discussion, because it's a paradigm shift. And if they can begin to have a better sense of, oh, it did work, you know, it did help that person unwind after a tough week at work. And it worked for a while, and that's why they do it again and again and again. Or you take a young person, their brain's not even fully developed, they're 16 years old. You know, they've already been hijacked by the substances, but the initial desire was to meet some of these needs. So we take worksheets like this, and they're a really good tool to help a family member develop some of these strategies. I mean, this one obviously is to build understanding and to build empathy. Yeah.
And just, yeah, I feel like I hope you all feel free to put in the chat, or even just call out, you know, just talk.
It's a very, very different way of looking at a person that you're very, very close to, that you love, that's a family member, and to think about that at some point in their lives, this satisfied a need. And that frankly, that person's no different than me, but maybe I reached out for food instead of pills, right?
Yeah.
And if I can become more understanding, then I have a better opportunity to communicate with you than when my rage is off the charts, or I'm living in resentment and I'm constantly bringing up all the stuff you did last week. Right? And then we wanted to share also, this is a busy slide. I'm a gardener. I love this. And I think this describes kind of what craft is all about. So you have this beautiful garden, flowers and vegetables, and has flowers and vegetables, but it also has weeds, right? So we need to give it fertilizer, we need to give it water. Some people would just water the whole thing and think the weeds will vanish. But at what cost?
Or not
The
water the
weeds-
whole thing. Yeah.
Not watering, that's correct. See, I'm just trying to talk to it and not read it. But if you water the whole garden, the weeds are going to grow. If you completely eliminate the watering, everything's going to die. Most everything. But what happens if you kind of become more careful about what you want to grow? You know, focus on the positive, ignore those ugly weeds or pull them, right? So the wise gardener steps back and decides to be more strategic and only the water and nourish the things that you want to grow. It takes a lot of practice. It's a whole new way of looking at things for a lot of these families, but it offers the promise of growing a garden full of healthy plants. And this offers the promise of reducing the levels of anxiety and depression in the parent or the partner, and also increasing the odds that you can get your loved one into treatment and keeping them engaged in your life.
Yeah. And we try to be the support that allows them to see that the effort to do this, to make this change, is not really more than the effort they're making to try and control the situation in ways that are, is not working. It's actually, more effective. It just requires a little attention because it's not, just a knee-jerk response. It's not what you're conditioned to necessarily, but it's what you're choosing. You're responding rather than reacting,
And
and
it's
deciding to.
skills-based. It's skills-based. So we're teaching people skills.
Yeah.
And hopefully improving their lives. So there is someone like us in every county in New Jersey now. These are the contacts for the northern region. I'm the contact for Hunterdon, Mercer, Somerset, and Monmouth. Pam is the person for Somerset County, and many of you know her. And then we have the southern region. And that will be included in the PowerPoint that I believe Rena's going to send to you afterwards. And then I think we would like to end. We also have references on the last page. Would you like to share with people, Pam, how we like to end a lot of our groups and even in conversations with our family members?
Yes. So we'd like to invite you to think of, and if you have time, if you don't have to hop off, you could share it in the chat, because we could all get ideas from each other. But share one way in which you can show kindness to yourself this week. Genuine kindness.
And I'm going to stop sharing the slides. Did that work?
Yep. I see people. Well, I see some people.
Oh, I love this. See, I didn't get to see the chat before.
Well, I saw some of it, but I couldn't, I wasn't, oh, there we go.
Take time to breathe. And we do
Let go of self-doubt. Yeah, I wish I could. I'm working on that.
And we do try to teach different techniques well, in the yoga world, we call it pranayama, but breathing techniques, even, the 5-finger breathing, inhale, up one finger, exhale down the other. We teach the square 4 counts breathing. One of the other advocates does Reiki. I occasionally will teach yoga. So we do try to give people those kinds of skills too. So like when Pam mentioned, hit the pause button, maybe put yourself in a timeout and go do some breathing, put one hand on your belly, one hand on your heart, try to connect with your breath.
Yeah.
Taking
Or
a walk outside.
Just go outside. Yeah. Walk away. Go
Today,
outside.
it looks beautiful out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Rena, for inviting us. Thank you, everyone, for attending. You have our contact information, I believe, in that second to last slide. Actually, Pam, why don't we put ours in the chat here, just in case?
You should put oh, okay, I'll put my number. Yeah. Hold on. I'm always sharing the wrong one.
Nobody